Hello and welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's live stream. Today with Outlaws of Thunder Junction, a set review for you where we're going to cover all of the commons and uncommons from this great new set for competitive Pauper Commander cPDH. We're going to go right down the colors starting at white, and we're going to move on into the uncommons, take a look at some of the commanders that you can play. Just a reminder for those of you new to the format, cPDH or Pauper Commander, competitive Pauper Commander, whichever tact you approach it with, is a format where we play with any uncommon in the command zone. It does not need to be a legend. So we're going to be going through some of the new options we have and some of the exciting new stuff we can play in the command zone. And there are some exciting new cards. This set is definitely like a mixed bag. There's definitely some good cards in the 99 for everyday decks. A lot of cards that are like specifically good for a certain deck. And then of course some commanders that introduce some very new and interesting stuff to the format. So we've got a couple of people here. We got Charles Vane saying Hollow Marauder, Ruthless Lawbringer, Lazov, Familiar Stranger. Seems like they'd be fun to brew around. Those are definitely some great ideas there. Erosium saying I was surprised at how well this set went over mechanically. Pardon me, the cards being balanced while also powerful enough to be interesting. Yep, absolutely. It's definitely a mixture of different things. So let's talk about what's hot and what's not in the Outlaws of Thunder Junction. First, we're going to start with white, and of course the goat here, or shall I say the armadillo. 1 mana 0/4 for the armored armadillo. You're going to see the cards that I think are premium here, or the ones that have an exceptionally good home marked with a little cowboy hat. Armored Armadillo is kind of in a long line of these cards that are 1 mana with a big butt and no power, traditionally with no other ability. Armored Armadillo basically shucks that by having Ward 1, which is not nothing, as well as an activated ability to grant itself power equal to its toughness. And this is important because the kind of decks where we want to play a 1 mana 0/4 don't always get to have their commander in play because of how good they are, and that is Rasaad. Rasaad, in its kind of most optimal form, is paired with Feywild Visitor. You can also do Sword Coast Sailor. Sword Coast Sailor takes more of a Voltron route, whereas Feywild Visitor produces a lot of 1/1s that get buffed up by stuff like your Bar the Doors, your what is it? A Solemnity? No, not Solemnity. It's a +0/+5 to your whole board, basically. And Rasaad basically makes your toughness your power. It's going to mean you have a 1 mana 4/4 with Ward 1. Rasaad is all about producing like Tarmogoyf-sized threats, multiple of them per turn, and just running your opponents over. And Rasaad doesn't see an enormous amount of play. But Rasaad is, admittedly, one of the fastest aggro decks in the format. If you do the math on some of their nut draws, they push a huge amount of damage. And Armored Armadillo is one of the best cards we've had for Rasaad, printed what it feels like directly into Rasaad in a long time, because Armored Armadillo is one of the few creatures that can actually still attack if Rasaad dies. It does cost you some mana, and he's only a 4/4, but it is pretty cool, and we're always open to having more of these 1 mana cards, because really, like, if Rasaad had its way, we would play all of the 0 mana, 0 mana creatures that have your Ornithopters and your Phyrexian Walkers, and then the rest of it would just be all 1 mana 0/4s, 1 mana 0/5s, even 1 mana 0/3s. So this is great. This will just replace some 2 mana creature. This is definitely premium in Rasaad. The Ward 1, definitely going to be nice. The next one I want to talk about here is Outlaw Medic. And Outlaw Medic is getting some attention, I think. It's not like, some huge banger. But it definitely is making me ask some questions about cards like this. Outlaw Medic compares most clearly to a card like Guildsworn Prowler, which, stat-wise is, 2 mana for a creature that's drawing a card when it dies. And it has some sort of a keyword, which is nice. Guildsworn Prowler, of course, works really nicely with Village Rites and Deadly Dispute. And so Outlaw Medic being white, often like Orzhov, is really good colors for plundering, and these are called plunders. That's what I call them, at least. Basically an effect that allows you to draw cards or gain some amount of advantage or resource by sacrificing some sort of permanent in play. It could be a land, it could be an artifact, a creature, an enchantment. These are all plunders. So when you pair these together, you get kind of a draw 3, right? But you get to do it in installments, which is really, really nice. You get to do it early, early Outlaw Medic, which can attack, it can block, and then later on when you want to draw some cards, you can take this relatively meaningless creature and get rid of it and trade it for another 3 cards, which is really great. This one has lifelink. Notably, the 1/3 is almost kind of like a debuff to the creature, because what's kind of nice is, it depends on what deck you're playing. If you are looking to mainly have a creature that can block and eventually you draw a card when you want it to draw you a card with a plunder, then the fact that it's a 1/3 is actually, is actually kind of nice. You could also say, though, that something like, for example, the Guildsworn Prowler is going to die to other things and accidentally draw you a card, which is kind of nice. Guildsworn Prowler can just be as a removal spell, right? With the Death Touch, it makes it hard to attack into us. But I think Outlaw Medic is suggesting that we might get more of these kinds of cards in the future, which is great. And maybe they'll be better than your like Novice Occultist, which is a 1 or 2 mana, what is it, a 2/1 or a 2/2, that when it dies, you draw a card and you lose a life. So basically you're taking Dusk Legion Zealot and you're making a little bit worse. In my opinion, if it's going to be a dies trigger, that's harder to achieve than an ETB. ETB just has to resolve. For it to die, we have to do something special to make that happen. Our deck has to be built around it. And in black, that's not so hard. But I think that these creatures should be better than their raid, right? Like, you should have some advantage to it. You should have a keyword. They could even go deeper on that and start making these better. And this is a good signal that they're going to continue to do that. So definitely excited about that. You guys know I love plundering. I think it's the best black card advantage we've ever had, and in common. And Outlaw Medic says, well, if you're an Orzhov or maybe Esper or something like that, or one of those other color combinations, and you want to be drawing a lot of cards and you want a body that does it alongside it, this is a great way to do it. The next one we're going to talk about is Bridled Bighorn. This one here is not among our sort of like premium cards, but it is sort of an honorable mention because it occupies a rather unique effect in common, and that is the ability to repeatedly produce creature tokens turn after turn. This one is the best one we've ever had. Bridled Bighorn is a 4 mana 4/3 with Vigilance, which is quite good. It means that we can actually like attack, make our token, and then saddle it up again and block again. And it's going to allow us to produce 1/1 white sheep token. Note that it's a saddle 2. That saddle 2 is going to come into play, I think, in a couple of decks that are going to want this. But it's well statted. The fact that it has a little bit of extra toughness is really great. It's going to survive most sweepers, and once it survives the sweepers, we can play something to the board, tap it to saddle it, attack, and we can start rebuilding right away. So I think this is actually well statted for the effect. The saddle cost isn't prohibitive, and the saddle cost also happens to work with a couple of 2-power commanders that really value being able to run creatures into the table over and over and over again. So Ellis Ilkor is a great example of that. Ellis is not doing a lot of attacking. Sometimes you're blocking with it, but Ellis just says we want to put bodies on the table, and we want things to die. And the Bridled Bighorn is going to allow us to do that turn after turn, while also kind of having a great attacker and a great blocker. We can even use the 1/1 sheep token to saddle the Bridled Bighorn. So this card is really self-contained in a lot of ways, and even though I think it only maybe has like a couple of homes, maybe like Denethor would be another one. Denethor also having 2 power. Denethor is also a plunder deck. Ellis is a plunder deck. These are decks that really want to generate card advantage from the creatures that they have in play. They have ways to create them. Denethor, of course, makes its own creatures, which is quite nice. But both of these can saddle up the Bighorn, make tokens, and really just kind of get to work. The curve is even kind of nice here as well. So definitely a card to be looking out for. It also works in Mentor of the Meek, but I don't think that there's a very good reason to be playing Mentor of the Meek anymore. With some of the other options that we have available. So anyways. I just wanted to mention too that Bridal Bighorn also sort of occupies a class of cards that is pretty rare, this like repeat token generation. Thraben Standard Bearer is one of them. There's two of these that allow you to discard cards to create tokens. And basically what this is saying is like discard a card, particularly Acacian Crier is really the one that's the most playable. Discard a card, create 2 soldier tokens is basically turn a card in your hand into Raise the Alarm, right? Over and over again, which can be very good in certain decks. I think the Bridled Bighorn goes a long way to improving on that. Stony Brook Schoolmaster has been used in Pauper as well to certain effect, I think, with cards like your Holdout Settlements and your Survivor's Encampment to just make 1/1s every turn. You can also do it with like the, Cittanul Stalwart and, Loam, Loam Dryad, the cards that allow you to tap tap a creature to make mana. This definitely is kind of in that class. Sen's Enlistment is another one, also about the same cost. We're getting 2 1/1s. We can retrace this every turn. But again, like if you compare all those cards that we just looked at to Bridled Bighorn, Bighorn is by far the best 1/1s token engine at common that we can just put in any white deck that we've ever had. So maybe it deserves a cowboy hat for that, but we'll leave it off for now. I also wanted to mention Mystical Tether. I don't really know how good this is going to be, but white does struggle a bit with interacting on the stack at instant speed. And the fact that this has the ability to target an artifact or a creature at instant speed with a little bit of extra mana is interesting. I also think that these enchantments that have this flexibility to kill things that you can reuse over and over again in a deck like Abdel, particularly Abdel Black, which tends to be kind of like a more mid-rangey kind of a deck. The Mystical Tether could actually be in a big mana deck. It actually could be cast at instant speed. And then you can reuse it to tag things over and over again. So like the way I imagine this going is if you did cast it at instant speed, you'd cast it and you'd hit somebody's commander. And then they would probably send it to their command zone. Leaving your commander underneath a card like this is very risky. So they send it to their command zone. And then you cast your Abdel and you flicker it. And when it comes back in later on, you're going to get something else for it. I don't think it's premium, but I do think that there's going to be homes for it. And just the flexibility to be able to cast it for 2 more to hit an artifact or a creature is going to be good. So yeah, I think expect to see this in maybe like those Abdel decks in particular. The next one I wanted to point out, just stat for stat and for all the abilities on it, struck me as very interesting. I don't know what home it has, and that is the Trained Ernix. Trained Ernix is a 2 mana 3/1. Whenever it's saddled, it's going to gain first strike and it's going to scry 1. And it only saddles for 2. The ability to repeatedly attack with this card because it has first strike and the side benefit of the scry is kind of interesting to me. I'm not really sure exactly where this goes. If you can buff it up, the big power, the first strike, all that stuff together can start looking quite nice. And of course, white does a really good job of buffing up its creatures. So, I'm not sure where this goes. This might be more of a casual card. I do want to mention, of course, if you do want to get the latest on the casual cards for Pauper Commander, do make sure to check out the live stream happening tomorrow. The PDH pals are going to be covering all of the spiciest stuff from this set, the stuff that we might not be talking about here for one reason or another. Make sure to check out their stuff and support them as well. They're going to have a great live stream tomorrow. Okay, so of course, yeah, we covered all that. Blue, so let's go into blue. The first one that I want to talk about is Harrier Strix. And Harrier Strix has a lot of text on it for a 1/1. The most important thing is that it's a 1/1 flying with any other ability. And the reason for that is because there are plenty of decks out there, particularly blue ones, that want cheap, evasive creatures that just do anything else. Like, we're not playing like a 1/1 flying that can't block, that kind of a thing. This thing does a lot more than that. And I wonder even if this will see some Pauper play too, just because the ability to tap down a permanent, maybe once or more a turn, if you like, ninjutsu, like ninjutsu 1, replay it and then play another one from your hand, tap them out, and then resolve your next spell in Pauper. That could be a thing. But in cPDH, Harrier Strix has this home in decks that are sort of like blue tempo, maybe blue proactive mid-range type decks. This taps down a permanent. That's, maybe it could be good for like removing a blocker, right? I could definitely see that happening. That's probably the most likely thing that'll happen here. Or maybe if you want to set up a turn where you go pre-combat, tap down a person's one of their 2 mana so that they can't counter, and then second main do something where they can't interact with you anymore, or to set somebody else to be able to interact up with that player because they're tapped down. But the other thing is that this card just loots. Like, it's really, really good. This is a pushed common. It's not busted. It's just what commons should look like, in my opinion. This is what commons should look like. They should have some relatively useful abilities that kind of, take you from one stage of the game to the other. And this one here in the late game, if you draw lands, you draw them dead, you can just loot them away. So oh, and actually I forgot to mention this one here. We're going to talk about it at the same time as Razzle Dazzler, because I think these 2 cards go in similar decks. Okay, so Razzle Dazzler is another one here that we're going to talk about at the same time. It's 2 mana for 1/2 whenever you cast your second spell each turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it cannot be blocked this turn. Casting 2 spells a turn is not always going to happen, but I think that the fact that this is another cheap, unblockable creature that sort of passively grows makes it a candidate for some decks that I quite like. It's a human wizard in blue. The fact that it's a human could be relevant for things like Of One Mind, which just says have a human and a non-human. And being a wizard could also be relevant, especially in these sort of like spellcasty decks. One spell slinger type stuff, perhaps like a Balmor Battle Mage or something. I'm going to take a quick moment here. I'm kind of smelling something funny. Yeah, one sec. I'm just got to check and see that nothing's burning. One moment. Hold on. It's like plastic burning smell. Okay. Anyways. Just follow my intuition. Okay. Nothing is burning. We are all okay here, at least nothing in my house. Maybe the neighbors? I don't know. It's got kind of a plastic burning smell, so I needed to follow that intuition there and check in. Okay, so Razzle Dazzler, being a human, being a wizard, becoming unblockable, working well in spellcasting decks, your Izzet tempo type stuff, and then growing passively over time. Both of these cards are going to be potentially a good choice in Rilsa. Harrier Strix, 100% going in Rilsa Rail. Harrier Strix is going to replace probably Tormented Soul. Tormented Soul is a 1/1 unblockable. It can't block. So, and it's also, it's better to get all of our cheap turn 1 plays in one color, because then we can kind of focus on having mana for that color. So Harrier Strix, I think, is going to be really good for Rilsa Rail, but Razzle Dazzler potentially as well. The +1/+1 counters can be proliferated by things like, what's it called? The 2 mana creature, 2 mana 1/1 Thrumming Bird. Thrumming Bird can proliferate those as well. And Rilsa Rail does have like a lot of spells. You're able to go like, maybe play out a 1-drop creature, attack, ninjutsu something, replay it. That's a way to get 2 spell casts in 1 turn. So Razzle Dazzler definitely kind of works in that context. The other home for it, Vector, that master of memes in the Common Connoisseurs, is going to be happy to see. These are both great in Elrond. Harrier Strix, more importantly, just because Harrier Strix is a good 1-drop, evasive 1-drop. But Elrond does cast multiple spells per turn, and it does like unblockable things. So Razzle Dazzler is kind of like a good payoff for the deck. A consistently growing threat that you can tempt onto and start getting those value triggers on. Next one I want to mention is not premium. I don't know where this card goes because there's a lot of versions of this card. There's like Naiad of Hidden Coves, but Geyser Drake is a 2/3 for 3 with flying. As long as it's not your turn, spells cost 1 less to cast. This is a significant upgrade on Naiad of the Hidden Coves because it can attack. Right, it's a flyer. It doesn't die to sweepers because it has 3 toughness and it's discounting your spells. I just don't know what deck this goes in. I don't know what deck really cares about this. You know, you could put it in something like Spellheart Chimera. No, not Spellheart Chimera. It's the, what's the card called? It's the one that we can do tandem lookout stuff with. Chimera ID equals, is it? It's the one that pings, which is Mischievous Chimera. Yeah. So Mischievous Chimera could play this. It's a 2-mana Is-It creature, 2/2 flyer that says whenever you cast a spell, like your first spell every turn, you ping everybody and scry one. So this would be nice for making things cheaper, stuff like you know, your draw spells cheaper, like Quick Study, you know, or Behold the Multiverse, things like that. It's going to discount those spells. So does this have a home? Probably. I just don't know where. I just not really sure exactly where. But I will mention that flying is a significant upgrade. There could be, you know, there could be a world where you even played this in something like TPI. Although a lot of TPI's instant speed stuff, TPI does a lot of stuff on its turn in term that uses colorless. So colorless stuff is going to tend to be on our turn. When it's not on our turn, what this would probably read is you don't need to pay the bargain cost or the you know, or the improvise cost on an instant speed spell, because most of our draw spells are sorcery speed. Most of them are sorcery speed, so we're casting them on our own turn. It would reduce the cost of like you know, things like Improvised Club, Heartfire, Echoing Truth, cards like that. So yeah, maybe in TPI. TPI has so many good cards in it though that like slots are very tight, and a card like this is sort of just enables other things, is probably often going to look kind of weird when you're like Lightning Bolt, Galvanic Blast, Counterspell, and none of it required any colorless pips. Geyser Drake could also actually be really good now that I think about it in Avalanche Caller. Avalanche Caller does a lot of stuff on its opponent's turns, mainly drawing cards, and an effect like this that discounts while also, it's kind of like a Mana Rock, but almost a little bit better, because if you cast more than one spell, then you're getting a big discount. So anyways, worth mentioning. The last one I wanted to mention, I don't know where the hell this goes, but look, 4 mana, 4/4 flash. Unfortunately, it enters tapped, so you can't be like blocking creatures and killing them with it, which is a shame. I would love if we got that. But this sort of a card like allows you to play a little better draw go in blue, and I wonder if it has a home. We have something like it that's 6 mana. This is the first one we've gotten that was like appropriately costed on like a big beating body. It's also a rogue, and that is relevant for certain shenanigans with rogues. On to black. Black, I think, is quite a bit richer when it comes to this set. Raven of Fell Omens is a banger. This card is amazing. 2 mana, 1/1 flying bird. Hashtag bird gang. Whenever you commit a crime, each opponent's going to lose 1 life or going to gain 1 life. This triggers only once each turn. That involves targeting opponents, creatures, targeting them, anything they control, or anything in their graveyard. This is pretty much going to be like a black staple for mid-range black decks. You're interacting with them players all the time. You know, you're killing things, you might be discarding things. This starts to look a little bit better even, or actually cards like, you know, Duress and what's the other one I was thinking of? Hymn to Turok start to look actually a little bit better alongside this too. Both of those cards are actually quite interesting to me lately, just because I don't want to discard cards from everybody. I want to discard player from one player. I want to take that player's hand and put them in the dumpster. I don't want to like drain the interaction from the whole table when I'm playing mid-range. I want to do that if I'm playing combo. Raven of Fell Omens is kind of like Creeping Bloodsucker, but you can trigger it immediately. You can play it and immediately get the trigger. This allows you to trigger during your opponent's turns too, so we're going to get more than 1 trigger per turn cycle potentially off of this. I really like this. Really, really like this. Notably, it does not work with sweepers. It does not work with anything that says each. It has to be targeting. So it's not going to work with like edict sweepers. It's just going to be targeted removal mainly. But the fact that it's on a flying body means it can get in an attack. It's very much like Basilica Screecher that doesn't cost you mana and gains you a little bit less life, but it's easier to trigger multiple times in a turn cycle. So I like this quite a lot. Very excited about that. Some of the homes, of course, Mayhem Devil looks like a very broken home for Raven of Fell Omens because every trigger is going to be a crime. Every trigger is a crime. And Rakdos decks, it can be tempting in Rakdos, especially like mid-range and control, to play all the best cards in Rakdos and then not really have any cards that allow you to survive late game pressure by gaining life. And Raven of Fell Omens is going to help us with that. If we just cracked, like, get like a trigger during our turn, maybe kill something during somebody else's turn, get like 2 triggers off of that, Raven is going to be a really nice card that way. If we get like 3 triggers off the Raven, this will be better than, if we get 2 triggers off of it, it is better than a vampire spawn because it's 1 mana cheaper and it flies. And so that's going to be, I think, fairly easy to do. Also, like if we forge this up, black is the color of initiative. It's a better color for initiative than almost all the other colors. And so if we forge this up, we get a 3/4, which is nice. So Mayhem Devil's great. Thrall Parasite seems like an amazing home for it because we're committing crimes all the time. You can actually commit crimes by paying 2 life to remove a counter from non-land permanent. You look at your opponent's thing, you say, I remove a counter from that. Oh, there's no counter. Okay, it actually does work that way. You can tap this, pay 2 life. So we can essentially pay a life to drain everybody for 1 once per turn where we don't interact with people. So we can just kill things and get the triggers, or we can use Thrall Parasite to pay 2 life to remove counters from things that don't even have counters. So that's pretty fun. The other one is Corpse Augur. Corpse Augur is a deck that it's a mono black deck that's basically you're playing like ad nauseum in the command zone. You're like drawing, you have a huge card advantage engine in the command zone that just has to resolve. Once it resolves, it just, after that, you just make it die somehow, and the deck is full of ways to make things die. This is a deck where, like in this particular case, you target their graveyard. That's going to give you the trigger. And so Corpse Augur is less about the drain, it's more about the gain, because Corpse Augur is only gating on how many cards you can draw is how much life you have. So Raven of Fell Omens is going to help keep us nice and topped off on our life total, going to make sure we can draw lots of cards. This deck is always hungry for black ways to gain life. Because it doesn't play a whole lot of draw spells otherwise. Like Corpse Augur draws so many cards so regularly that you kind of just want to play cards that gain you life so that you can actually pay the life. Like I've had plenty of times with Corpse Augur where I look around and I'm like, the least I can draw right now is 7. The most I could draw is like 10. And I can't pay 10 life, or even 7 hurts. That's a lot of life to pay to draw cards, but 7 cards, man, that's the gas. So anyways, Grey Merchant, another one. Grey Merchant is just another good mono black deck that's going to love the Raven. Rilsa Rail could also do it too. Rilsa Rail is definitely a good home for this. It's got ways to commit crimes all over the deck. So, and then the last ones I want to mention are Night Veil Predator. Night Veil Predator has in it the Psionic Gift and Hermetic Study, basically, and Viridian Longbow, which are basically ways that the Night Veil Predator can ping things to kill them with the Death Touch. Raven of Fell Omens just wants you to target. It's perfect for that. It's a great repeat life engine, or life total, life gain engine in this deck, and it's a creature that can eat an edict. It's also a creature that can be suited up with a cranial plating if you wanted it to, although usually you would suit up the Night Veil Predator. But if you attack and somebody has a flying blocker and they block the Night Veil Predator, you can swap it over to the Raven and do some damage that way too. And then the last one I wanted to mention, Witherbloom Apprentice commits crimes like crazy. The Magecraft trigger is not going to count as committing a crime, unfortunately. That's one of the bummers about the Raven, is that it needs to be targeted. But basically, like, Witherbloom Apprentice is kind of in this weird spot where, at least my build of it, where if you're not doing slime stuff, we got to kind of figure out a new path, because basically there are all these creatures that drain people that basically have a Magecraft trigger on top of them. And so one of the rebuilds we're going to do with Witherbloom Apprentice is basically trying to figure out, like, how do we just get a lot more creatures in the deck so that we can start plundering? Because Witherbloom Apprentice was not a beneficiary of plunder initially, because you had to have like artifacts and creatures, and Witherbloom wants neither of those because you want to cast instants and sorceries. So but Raven of Fell Omens is going to be a great card in this deck because we're interacting with people, we're draining them, It basically has multiple repeat Magecraft triggers on it. And then the last thing is Dina Soul Steeper. It's a mid-range deck. It interacts. This is a good one to do. This one also is each, unfortunately. It's a good thing that it's each for the deck, but bad for the Raven. Last thing, our next card I want to talk about is Nezumi Linebreaker. Nezumi Linebreaker is a really, really cool card, not because it's like super, super special, but because it is very unique and it's very good in actually like a lot of pretty important decks. Nezumi Linebreaker, when it dies, you're going to make a 1/1 red mercenary token that can buff something for 1. Activate as a sorcery. The ability on the mercenary literally doesn't matter. If this card literally just read, I'm a 1/1, when I die, I make another 1/1, it would be great. And that's kind of what it is. It's a Nested Shambler. It doesn't go as hard as Nested Shambler. Nested Shambler can become quite a bit bigger in terms of like how many tokens you make. So Nested Shambler is definitely better, but there's only 2 of these. There are only 2 of these cards in black, a 1 mana 1/1, or just really a 1 mana creature that replaces itself with a body, specifically a body. And these work really, really good in Gut decks, particularly Gut Agent of the Iron Throne. Agent of the Iron Throne is a pinger. It does 1 damage every time you sacrifice an artifact or a creature. Nezumi Linebreaker is special because it's a creature that can attack to get Gut's trigger. So Gut plays artifacts that replace themselves when they die, that don't involve bodies, that don't involve creatures, but like it really prefers to have something like Nezumi Linebreaker, or Linkbreaker, sorry, because you need to be able to have something in play that can attack on turn 3. So turn 1, Nezumi Linebreaker, turn 2, something, like, whatever it is, and then turn 3, Gut, you can attack with the Linkbreaker, sacrifice the Linkbreaker, make the 4/1 profit. And so that's a really, really good home for it. But the Linkbreaker goes a lot further than that because there's a lot of other Rakdos and black decks that want a body that replaces itself. One of them is Keskit Dargo. Keskit Dargo performed well in the Sanctuary Open tournament, the one that we just had, the Sanctuary Open 4. Keskit just says play lots of artifacts and creatures that like replace themselves with some sort of onboard permanent that we can sacrifice, right? Because then, like a card like Nezumi Linkbreaker, if you aren't utilizing it for card advantage, is not very good. But the fact that we get 2 of it and we have Keskit, which is going to kind of turn it into more cards twice, makes this excellent. It makes it such a good home for this. We can sack this to Keskit. If we sack the 3 other things, we can immediately cast Dargo. Dargo's cost is reduced, and we're drawing cards. And we're going to do it twice because Linkbreaker gives us another body. The fact that you can give another creature +1 power matters with Dargo. If you can give Dargo 1 more power twice, it's a 2-shot kill. They have to block. So Linkbreaker, very good. Very good. It has other homes too. Keskit Tormod is a deck that I've been really excited about. And this is kind of like the best zombie deck in the format. I haven't had a chance to play a whole lot of it outside of playtesting. But it's a really grindy deck that just loves a card like this, that just allows you to churn through things. Yeah, Zach, exactly. Dargo making it a 2-hit is not nothing. Exactly. I think that's very relevant. This like ability to give something +1/+0 may actually turn up more relevant. If you have flyers in your deck, if you have like your Raven of Fell Omens, you have your Basilicus creature, giving it a bit of extra power might actually be kind of good. With Dargo, Keskit, really this deck is the same thing. It just wants lots of food for Keskit to draw lots and lots of cards. The next one I want to mention is Skyfisher Spider. I don't know if it exactly goes in this deck, but there could be builds of it where you do want something like Nezumi Linkbreaker to ensure that you can consistently sack another creature to destroy a non-land permanent. The fact that you get 2 of them is really nice because my version of it actually plays Grave Flickers. It plays ways to, like Grave Flicker the Skyfisher Spider, sacrifice the Skyfisher Spider. It leaves, comes back in, sacrifices the Nezumi's token after you've already done it once, and it can blow up something else. So I think it's relevant there as well. And then the last one is Ruthless Lawbringer, which is one we're going to talk about later on as a potentially new new potential cPDH commander that I've already seen people like Brad from the PDH pod starting to look into. I'm sure the pals have considered it and said no, commander. They're pretty antithetical to any sort of like repeat removal in the command zone. But Orzhov, the master of Orzhov is Brad. We got Brad loves this kind of stuff, and he's already been working on something like that. So yeah, something like this that's going to allow you to get 2 triggers out of this is kind of saying like Nezumi Linebreaker is 2 sorcery speed Vindicates, or instant speed if you can flicker their Lawbringer, which is really cool, being able to convert it into something like that. Next card. Woo, this one's a friggin' heater. We got Vault Plunderer, 3 mana for a 3/1 human rogue. Okay, these are relevant creature types. ETB, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. This is basically the same thing as Phyrexian Rager, okay? Except that it has 1 more power, it's a human rogue, and it targets a player. Okay, so why is this important? Because they lose a life. You can use it to draw cards, or you can make your opponents lose the game when you go infinite, right? Yeah, they're going to draw cards, right? But, maybe you do something ahead of time to stop them. Maybe you can like tap down their things, whatever it is. If everybody's tapped out and you go for your combo, this is one way to do it. I didn't mention it here as well, but like Abdel players could potentially do something similar with this. Making so much mana that by the time their opponent, they draw their opponent, their snuff out or whatever that they can use to interact with it, that it doesn't really matter anymore, right? But more importantly than all this is it's just another Phyrexian Rager, right? And it's got better stats. 3/1 is more appealing, I would say, than the Phyrexian Rager. I would actually prefer if the Phyrexian Rager was a 1/3, but because it's a 2/2, a 3/1 is better. A 3/1 is better than a 2/2, and a 1/3 in black would be better than a 3/1, but this is great. We could put this in stuff like Honest Rutstein. We can put this in any creature-based deck, black creature-based deck that wants to draw cards and have a body. Notably, if you forge this up, it becomes a 5/3, right? It's pretty big, and it's a human rogue. So we can do prowl stuff with this. You could even potentially burn somebody out of the game if you have a way to like return this to your hand. Sometimes you just have a couple more damage you need to deal. So Vault Plunderer is really good, and the ability to use it with Ghostly Flicker is definitely interesting in like Baleful Strix. Probably Baleful Strix, maybe Possessed Scab, some of the like, Dimir Flicker decks. This also, would be good in, what's the, Quasar Augur of Agonies. Quasar Augur of Agonies negates this life loss as well, which makes Vault Plunderer a good call for that. Normally you wouldn't be super excited in a mid-range deck to be like losing some life to draw cards, but you can definitely do that in Quasar. The next one, kind of in the same vein, is Mourner's Surprise. This one took a little while for me to like sort of process like exactly what it was. It's 2 mana for a sorcery, but the sorcery here is misleading. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, create a 1/1 mercenary token with that random ability to give power. Mourner's Surprise is actually like a class of cards that I've taken some time to like warm up to. And that is with like Emergency Weld. Do I have Emergency Weld listed here? Oh, here, let's just take a second. I want to get these on the same screen so that you guys can actually see them together side by side. So let's just duplicate this really quick. We'll move this over to here, move that up to there. There we go. Cool. Okay, so let's look at Emergency Weld. Emergency Weld is 2 mana, return target artifact or creature. That's actually kind of friggin' crazy. Emergency Weld is such a sleeper because with Plunder, it's like one of those things that like when Plunder got good because of Fanatical Offering, because of Mephitic Draught, because of all those things like, Tithing Blade coming in, now we have to look back and see, oh, what else works, right? Emergency Weld gets back artifacts and creatures, which means you can get like a Mephitic Draught, you can get an Ichor Wellspring, you can also get any creature, like a Fleshbag Marauder, Chain Devil, Vicious Battle Rager, Underdark Explorer, all sorts of really, really good stuff you can get in Black Gary, Crypt Rats. And this is a 1/1. This is a 2-mana 1/1 that draws us a card. And in some ways, it's going to be better than draw a card. Sometimes it'll be a little bit worse, right? Mourner's Surprise is the same damn thing. The fact that it's a sorcery is actually kind of interesting because it means that it gets to go in some rather unique places like Witherbloom Apprentice, where you wanted to have creatures that you could plunder away. You wanted to be able to get things back from your graveyard maybe, and now you have a spell that creates a creature that produces value. It draws you a card, right? So these are basically like Dusk Legion Zealot. They're really the same thing. They kind of read the same way. They don't lose you any life, which is interesting. The Emergency Weld, of course, gets an artifact back. This one makes a 1/1 that can buff things, which, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that'll be coming into play. So where are we going to see these played? They will definitely be seen alongside the Plunder. Village Rites, Deadly Dispute. You're going to see these, these may just become part of the core of kind of your average black mid-range deck, right? They're just good cards. And so some of the homes, Witherbloom Apprentice, definitely one of them, but there's going to be a lot of other ones. We're not going to go down all the list of like good black creature decks that you could play this in, but you can even be getting back things like Etched Familiar, Soul Cage Fiend. You could get back your Serrated Scorpion to burn people out. These are great cards. Very good. Next one I want to talk about is Desperate Bloodseeker. This one is indeed actually premium for a certain set of decks. It is a 2-mana 2/2, lifelink, enters the battlefield, target player mills 2. That target player is going to be us. Unless somebody's doing like weird Tatiova things, with Tidal Bore, then you can mill things into their graveyard. But this is basically like Deathcat Marionette, and it's like Mire Triton. I think that Mire Triton is absolutely the best of all of them because it's gaining you the 2 life that you kind of lifelink with this thing. You're probably only lifelinking at once. And it's got Death Touch. So it's not as good in the sense that like the Death Touch is definitely better than the lifelink, but these cards are increasing in density, right? We have to notice these patterns when Wizards of the Coast signals to us that there's a certain effect or a class of effect or a certain rate that they think is acceptable. We should be paying attention. And right here we have 2-mana, 2-power creatures that ETB mill 2 with some form of, keyword on them. This is a 1/1, I guess. So there is that. Now, where do these go? I think Conrad is kind of like one of the obvious options. For versions of Conrad that are interested in milling themselves, these are definitely where we want to be. I think that there's not very much question about that. They themselves are creatures, so when they go to the graveyard, they're also going to trigger Sir Conrad. The lifelink, might help keep you alive a little bit. Vampire type, not that important, but you can also forge this up if you have the initiative, and a lifelinker that gets bigger is definitely something to keep in mind. Maybe a Cranial Plating on it, but again, Cranial Plating probably not going with Sir Conrad. Another home that you could see it in potentially is Corpse Augur, although my builds of Corpse Augur do not really focus on self-mill. I'm not really focused on having a large number of creatures in my graveyard. I'm mainly focused on other people having a large graveyard because of our sweepers, our edicts, things like that, right? And in the process, we do have them, but this has lifelink on it. So lifelink and self-mill, maybe this will find a home in there because it is a very cheap creature that, puts some cards into the graveyard. Maybe we had a creature, and then we've got a lifelinker in play that is also a creature that when it dies, when we plunder it away, we'll get to draw more cards off Corpse Augur. The other one I wanted to mention is Araumi. I think I said that right. Alcadron will be out there either cheering or gnashing his teeth. Araumi, I think is how it's supposed to be said. And it's a 3-mana 1/4. This card, you guys know this card. People love Araumi. It's not very good in cPDH, unfortunately. I don't say that because I'm like prejudiced against this merfolk wizard. It's because people have tried it a lot and they haven't had good results with it. Araumi can threaten to do some really dangerous things, like casting 3 Garys from your graveyard, or demolishing everybody's hand. And maybe Araumi's lack of success comes from the fact that people want to do things that are too devastating, particularly hand discard. Hand discard attracts a certain kind of hate from the table that is reasonable. Basically, like if somebody's going to do something, say your opponent has like a burglar rat type card or a virus beetle in their graveyard and they're going to untap with Araumi, I may make the decision to use 1 card and kill Araumi instead of discarding 3 cards. So I'm saving myself 2 cards by using 1. So maybe Araumi is better when it's not being used to discard everybody's hands, and you maybe focus on smaller stuff like, like serrated scorpions and, like ETB drain stuff that isn't Gary, just small ball stuff, right? And I think Bloodseeker here is actually really good. You're going to get to attack for 6 lifelink. You're going to mill, cards. When you just play it out, it's great to mill it. Then you can plunder it away and then bring it back to mill again. This is going to fill the yard really nicely. It's going to set you up for your next things. So maybe cards like this will help people take a different tact with Araumi that isn't, trying desperately to do things that nobody wants you to have done, like to do to them, in a deck that needs to untap. Like the problem with Araumi is that it needs to tap. It has a summoning sickness problem, as well as like a fear factor problem. Nobody wants to have their hand discarded with this card. Nobody wants a Gary to come into play. So anyways, Desperate Bloodseeker looks great there. Let's move on to red. Let me get some water. My lips are parched from all this yakking. Reckless Lackey. I can see you Pauper players out there salivating over this card. What a common. 1-drop, 1/2, first strike, haste. Like, whoa. Like, where did Raging Goblin go? Raging Goblin's what I grew up on. 1 mana, 1/1 haste. He just raged. That's like his vibe here. Reckless Lackey has way more text than that. It's a goblin. It's a pirate. It has first strike. It for some reason has 2 toughness. Like, and if that wasn't crazy enough, you can sacrifice the damn thing to draw a card and make a treasure. What the hell is this? What, like, okay, I'm not mad. I'm just impressed. I'm not mad at all. Yeah, Papoosh, that's a lot of text. This is a wall of text. Why does it draw you a card? I mean, I'm happy. Like, it's awesome. Like, Watsy, see this smile? If you want to replicate the smile, you just keep printing commons like this. Like, this is power creep at common, and I am here for it. Damn, there's a lot of things you can do with this. First of all, if you're a red deck that is doing stuff with equipment, okay, which is like kind of a formula in mid-range red. If you want to do mid-range red, one of the things you do is you don't, like, card advantage isn't really something we have a ton of access to in mid-range red. What we do have access to is busted ways of making a ton of mana with, like, Prying Blade, Gold Vein Pick, your Sticky Fingers. What's the other one that we have as well? Oh, it's an axe or a hammer or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but there's another equipment. We basically have 4 equipments to say whenever you attack and deal damage to somebody, you're going to make a treasure, right? And those cards work really good with Reckless Lackey because he has first strike, so you can actually make your treasures in combat. If you have a commander that cares about artifacts entering the battlefield, loading up Reckless Lackey with first strike is in combat before that thing deals damage. Going to make a bunch of treasures with those cards. You also cards like Ceremonial Knife that are making blood tokens. Reckless Lackey is just sick. Play this on turn 1, like never count out a 1-drop that comes down on turn 1 and immediately starts hitting. This thing is going to get in for like 3 damage probably before it can't attack anymore, and then it's got first strike. And then later on, when you top deck this thing, you just sacrifice it, you get 1 mana back, and you get a card, and you get an onboard treasure. It's crazy. So where do we do? Malcolm. Okay, this card is good in Malcolm. Yeah, Pauper Ragavan. Pauper Ragavan. That's, yeah, I mean, he's quite a bit worse than Ragavan, but he does a damn good impression. He's not a Monkas. He's a Goblin Pirate. But Malcolm Kedis is probably a very good home for this. And part of the reason is that you need an artifact to enter play to start the loop. So if you have a pinger and you've changed it over into a pirate, the first artifact that enters will trigger the ping, which will hit everyone, which will trigger Malcolm to make your treasures, which trigger. It's a loop, right? And so with Reckless Lackey, once we make it into a pirate, if we have the mana, we can, as an activated ability, and remember, creating a token just happens, right? Like it just happens. You get that trigger right away. So that means you could, like, if you had Reckless Lackey in play, you can do your combo right away by making that treasure off of the sacrifice. Also, Reckless Lackey can come in, if you go like turn 1 Reckless Lackey, turn 2 Malcolm, hit somebody, make a treasure. That's a hell of an opener. Reckless Lackey with Malcolm kind of becomes a ritual. It's a combo card, but it's also a ritual, right? Like, very, very strong. Very, very strong. So yeah, that's one home. Of course, Breaches is another one. And then the other one is Rogue Rack. Some people are trying to go even turbo faster and using like Rogue Rack with cards like Infernal Plunge to go just a little bit more ham with the Rogue Rack. So those are some good ones. But really, like, I think that there's a lot of other decks you could put this in. You could even put this in Oxida Finisher. Oxida Finisher, the fact that it has haste and first strike means that we could play the Reckless Lackey off the top. And if we say Oxida is dead, right, and we're like suiting up, we're getting ready to just recast our Oxida, and off the top comes Reckless Lackey, and we just cast the Reckless Lackey, spend all of our mana attaching all of our equipment, and it's got first strike and haste. It immediately punches right then and there. And I think that that's going to be really good. Also, like off the top, if all we need is just a little bit of dig, later in the game we draw this, you could just sacrifice it, draw a card, make a treasure. I think that's really, really really good. Next one I'm going to talk about is Highway Robbery. I don't really have much to say about this. I think people are excited about it. It's fine. It's just fine. I'm putting the cowboy hat on it because I think that I might be not valuing this as much as maybe I should. Like, my alarm bells are going off a little bit that maybe this is better than I think it is, but I'm looking at it and it's like, whatever. It's like a sorcery speed, thrill of possibility. Do note that it's not as an additional cost. So if it gets countered, there's no cost to you. You may discard a card or sack a land. And the sacking of a land is really where this is going to probably show up. Maybe even like Spellslinger red decks might want this. I think that this could definitely go in Loyal Apprentice. Loyal Apprentice is the mono red sort of mid-range, proactive mid-range deck. This could be really good there, right? Sack a land that you don't need anymore because you're making treasures. Plot it so that you can cast it for free the next turn, or you can just like tap 2 lands, cast it, sacrifice the land that you tapped to draw 2 cards. And yeah, strictly better than Tormenting Voice. So I guess Rosie, we've got a good point there. Just as being better than Tormenting Voice, it's playable, but I think it's better than Thrill of Possibility, potentially. The ability to sack a land is pretty good. This is a plunder, right? This is a plunder. It's a shame it doesn't say artifact on it, because then we would be playing it in TPI too. You could play it in TPI. Someone on the Discord said free storm triggers with plot. Yeah, that's true. Although I don't Like, you'd have to show me a red deck that really wants to storm. I don't know. It's weird. The plot stuff is weird. Oh, you know where you would play this though? It is in Levon. Levon's a 3 mana commander that allows you to that every time you cast a non-creature spell, you give target creature power equal to the converted mana cost of the spell. So what you would do with this, you could actually use this in Gixian Infiltrator as well. Or not Gixian Infiltrator, sorry, Gitaxian Spellstalker. Yeah. You could use this in... Maybe in Crackling Drake. I'm not exactly sure, because when you plot it, it goes into exile. So you do get the value from that, although that's not usually a huge big deal. Yeah, I don't know. Airness Street Urchin. Yeah, actually it's very good in Airness. Sack a land. Ooh, Erosium, really good point there. This is good in Airness Street Urchin, for sure. Because Airness, one of the things it does struggle with is card advantage. You know, it can get lands back over and over as card advantage, and it can use those lands as part of looting, right? Like get the, like loot a land away, get the land back with Airness. That's pretty good, right? And Highway Robbery allows us to just sacrifice a land first, draw 2, get the land back. That's pretty good. I don't know when you would want to save this, like plot it instead of cast it. Maybe you plot it if you don't want to sack a land and you don't want to discard a card. That's exactly when you do it. You plot it, you just stash it away for later. Next one here, and again, there's a couple of these red ones that I don't really have a ton to say about it. A Quilled Charger, 4 mana, 4/3. Whatever it attacks and it's saddled, so if you saddle it up, it's going to get +1/+2, so it becomes a 5/5 menace. It's a 4 mana 5/5 menace when you saddle it. The reason I wanted to mention this is because there are a lot of red decks that have like a lot of 1/1 tokens, like goblin tokens and whatnot, that they can't really attack with very well. They're used for Dargo, they're used for this or that or the other thing. And being able to potentially, I'm not sure if this is something that would happen, but like saddle this up and then sacrifice the tokens you saddled with to Dargo or something along those lines. 5/5 menace is definitely pretty good. It also, saddle 2 is kind of right in the range of like pingers, where you could like take pingers that usually don't attack, saddle this up and attack with it. Not a lot to say about it, but it just struck me as like, 4 mana 5/5 menace is nothing to laugh at. And it could have a home that I'm just not familiar with. Next one is Outlaws Fury. I'm going to take it down a notch here by using my standing desk. Oh, yeah, Orfeo can saddle this. That's a really good point, Erosium. Damn, dude, you're on a heater tonight. This is amazing in Mr. Orfeo. There's a lot of good stuff in Mr. Orfeo. And actually, the biggest problem with Mr. Orfeo in this card is that, although, man, 10 power menacing creature is kind of crazy. The bigger problem that I see with Mr. Orfeo in this card is that I'm not actually convinced that Mr. Orfeo wants to lean into its doubling of its power ability, which is really what this Quilled Charger is all about, right? This Quilled Charger is basically saying we want to like hit people for big damage, right? Quilled Charger, though, kind of, we do play, so Mr. Orfeo doesn't usually attack. Mr. Orfeo is like blocking, he's amplifying things, but what's really great is when you can use a vehicle or saddle him to get in some more damage, because he's not usually attacking. So you're taking something that doesn't normally attack that just amplifies damage and you're making it attack. So actually this could definitely go in Mr. Orfeo. The question with Mr. Orfeo is whether you're actually leaning into his doubling ability or whether you're just a like Jund good stuff deck. Because like 3 colors when you're doing mid-range means more initiative, it means more impetus cards, it usually means much better removal, or it means getting a fog ability, which is pretty good. And it just, there's a lot of things you get out of it when you go 3 colors. So like Mr. Orfeo, there's definitely an argument that you just play Mr. Orfeo as a Jund good stuff deck. Just like, here's all the best cards in Jund: Scred, Terminate, Go for the Throat, Moment's Peace, Tangle, Avenging Hunter. You don't get to play Predatory Impetus because that card's pretty bad, but yeah. So yeah, good call. Outlaws Fury is notable because it can kind of draw you a card. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Is really a hell of a text line for red. The question is, Outlaws. They have to be assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, or a warlock to be an outlaw. I don't know what deck can make that happen, but I do know that like these 3 mana, anthems that give you a card, in return, are like tend to be kind of desirable, right? Like in aggressive decks, you just want to get that card back. So yeah, I mean, worth keeping in mind. I don't know where it's going to go, but definitely may have a home somewhere. The last one we're going to talk about in red is Irascible Wolverine. This card is actually pretty cool. 3 mana, 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, it's another form of like red card advantage. And you can see like the pattern here is like we have Reckless Lackey gives us a card, Highway Robberies cards, Outlaws Fury a card, Irascible Wolverine a card. So like one of the patterns here is that just red card advantage is starting to get better, and that's really exciting. When it enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. Now the way that you offset that, because if you have to pay 3 mana to get a card off the top, you may not be able to cast it. You can play it if it's a land, but you might not be able to cast it because you spent 3 mana on the Wolverine. Where you turn that upside down is by plotting it and then casting it later, and you get a free card off the top during another turn. I think that's potentially interesting. It's just a 3/2. There's nothing like super special about this card in that way, but it is replacing itself. You could kind of look at this as like a slow Phyrexian Rager. That's another way to look at it, right? 3 mana, 3/2. It's got a little more power, which is nice. Yeah. Moving on to green, our last color. We've got Hard Bristle Bandit, and I know that most people, like me, knew exactly where this was going to go. This is an Aranis Street Urchin card through and through, and it's kind of a busted one. If Aranis goes through a whole turn cycle and kills something in each turn cycle, you're going to get to untap the Hard Bristle Bandit every single time. It can only do it once each turn, but like you can see that this could produce like a shitload of mana. And it's kind of paying for the Street Urchin. Hard Bristle Bandit is paying for the Street Urchin activations by activating the Street Urchin. So pretty good. I don't think there's much else to say about it. It may have other homes as well. Witherbloom Apprentice could be one if you wanted like something that produced a lot of mana that was like paying you off during other people's turns. It's not really the right kind of card for it, but it has an effect that sort of works with this. There's probably a lot of homes for the Bristle. There could be like Skyfisher Spider might be another one. Any sort of like, I'm mainly looking at green-black. Green-blue could work too. Because countering spells is committing crimes. That could be one option as well. So Simic is definitely one place. Golgari is going to be another. Gruul, not so much outside of Street Urchin. Aranis Street Urchin is a great home for it, but it's probably the only Gruul one that I can think of that would actually want to do that. Next one is Giant Beaver. Giant Beaver has a home. It has one home, and it's a good home, and that is in Goreclaw. She hungry for cards like this. Giant Beaver, there's a lot of things going on here. Giant Beaver is also a wall of text. 4 mana for a 4/4 Vig. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that saddled it this turn. Okay, which is an unfortunate thing because there's other things I'd like to do with this. But Giant Beaver is just a 2 mana 4/4 Vigilance. It's really a 2 mana 5/5 Vigilant Trample when you attack with Goreclaw. But Goreclaw can also saddle the Giant Beaver. The way that that's going to work is when we're recasting Goreclaw. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but basically, when Goreclaw dies, the second time we cast Goreclaw, we'll be able to saddle up with the Giant Beaver, make this into make our Goreclaw into a 5/4, which is great, and get to work that way too. Oh, Fly, you've got a really good point. Hard Bristle Bandit is really good in Gnarlback Rhino. Yeah, really well. You guys are on fire tonight. You got some great ideas. Yeah, Hard Bristle Bandit's great in Gnarlback Rhino because Gnarlback Rhino is a mono green control deck that basically fights and bites everything at instant speed and at sorcery speed. And the Hard Bristle Bandit's going to help us keep mana during those turns. Yeah, that's huge actually. That could dramatically increase. Oh, actually, that's actually really messed up. Gnarlback Rhino has a lot of cards that just say target creature does something and then draw a card. Like target creature gains Death Touch, draw a card. So there's usually we want to be targeting our Gnarlback Rhino with that, but maybe it targets two things, like particularly fight spells are going to be really good with the Bandit. It means we're going to get to hold up more mana during other people's turns. It's going to be hard to find a room for Hard Bristle Bandit, but it's a very, very good card in that deck. Yeah, great point. So yeah, Beaver, Goreclaw. Second cast of the Goreclaw, you're going to get to saddle this up when Goreclaw comes into play, turn it into a 5/4, which is going to be a better attacker the next time around. And the fact that it has Vigilance is huge. When Derek and I built the original Goreclaw cPDH deck, we talked a lot about the importance of Vigilance. Aggro decks kind of need to have life gain in some ways because they're just swinging every turn. So they're fully open to everybody just doing whatever they want to them. And the way that you can prevent that is by having Vigilance creatures, or you gain life, right? Either one's translating to not getting hit as much. And so this creature just being like an attacker and a blocker is really great. You can also saddle this using your 1/1 creature ramp guys, although you probably have better uses for the mana. So like over time, you could turn a dork into an attacker with the Giant Beaver. So definitely looks like a good home for it. But there's another card that goes in Goreclaw, and that is Tumbleweed Rising. Tumbleweed Rising is rather pushed. Yeah, I mean, it's pushed. 2 mana, make an elemental creature that's X power, where X power and toughness, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. This is so good in Goreclaw because we have creatures that get a lot bigger than this ever cost. So like Goreclaw, one of the minimum things we look for is a 4 mana 4/4. We're looking for a 4 mana 4/4 because or really we're looking for something with 4 power, and there are a lot of 4 mana 4/4s that become 2 mana 5/5 tramplers with Goreclaw in play. And this card is 2 mana, and as our first creature, it's not going to be a good one. We're going to be kind of sad because well, actually no. Even then, if we just had Goreclaw, you attack with Goreclaw. Goreclaw gets +1/+1, so it becomes 5. 2 mana makes a 5/5 creature, and it's going to attack as a 6/6 trample. So this card is just busted in Goreclaw. It's exactly what we want. And there are much bigger creatures in Goreclaw. If you cast like an Annoyed Altasaur, and then you just put like a 7/7 for 2 mana into play that becomes an 8/8 trample. Tumbleweed Rising is disgusting in that way. Tumbleweed Rising is also very good in Mr. Orfeo. If you make something into an 8 power creature, you just play this and you're just immediately get yourself like an 8/8, a 10/10, whatever it is. Like there's some really big creatures in Mr. Orfeo. And Slimes. Yeah, you could play it in Slimes. We would play it in Slimes because this is going to be making a slime that is 1 power less for 1 mana. So this is actually just a better slime, isn't it? It's worse in the sense that it doesn't make our other slimes bigger when it's in the graveyard. But it is a cheaper slime, which is something. Maybe, yeah. Tumbleweed Rising. That's interesting. It's great. You can also play this in Witherbloom Apprentice too. It's another one of these weird like creatures that's like non-creature spells that has a creature on it. Zach says V2 Ghazi Guildmage, not a deck now, but 5 more of these. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we get 5 more of them and it's good. My Orpheus Slimes deck in this it would slap. Yeah, Orpheus Slimes, huh? That's quite interesting. Yeah, you do like Golgari milling and stuff. That's kind of cool. And they do have trample. So, interesting. Buddy says, Breaches plus Malcolm could be paired with Outlaw's Fury to buff your pirates while hitting another card. So you're going back to Outlaw's Fury here because they are pirates. Yeah. It's a shame it doesn't give like First Strike or something, But Malcolm flies, Breaches is Menace. You get another card. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I hadn't thought about that, but that makes sense. Yeah, but Orpheus Slimes, that is definitely less spice, for sure. I think I have an Orpheus Slimes deck, and I've got like a list for it, but I think I left it behind when I started working on Wood Sage, because Wood Sage is just such a busted Slimes deck. You've won 4 games against regular EDH decks with it. Yeah, I imagine that they're like, I imagine that their sweepers just look really stupid. And the lack of removal probably looks really stupid when you just like run people over with slimes. So yeah, Tumbleweed Rising in Witherbloom, Giant Beaver, Goreclaw. The other deck that I just wanted to mention, we're going to get to it a little bit later, that Giant Beaver could be good in as well, is in a certain Gruul deck. And did I actually put the wrong creature here? Yeah, I meant to put Tumbleweed Rising. Both of these could potentially go in this, but there's a potentially new Gruul commander that we're going to talk about later on. Next one is Voracious Varmint. 2 mana, 2/2. You can pay 1, sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. This card is most comparable to just a new Cathar Commando, and I think it's worth mentioning just for that. It doesn't have Flash, but and Vigilance is like fine, I guess. Like you can make this bigger, buff it up maybe, and then the Vigilance is good. The Vigilance is a little weird. Like this doesn't need to have Vigilance. Like Vigilance makes me want to buff something up. It makes me want to have a big attacker and blocker, right? But then it sacrifices itself. So like, why? So I think it's bad templating, to be perfectly honest. I think this should just have Flash. Because Cathar Commando is really good. Cathar Commando sees play in a lot of other formats for being an instant speed creature, that has an activated ability to sacrifice and destroy an artifact or enchantment. I think this sees play in cEDH. Voracious Varmint should have just had Flash, but I think even though it doesn't, it's still good. This is an upgrade on like the Caterpillar, or Death Touch would have been better. There's a lot of other things that could have had too. And also it's just, yeah, like you're saying, Fly. It's pretty based for just being a varmint. A varmint. I guess this is what a varmint looks like. What is he eating? Oh, wait, is that dynamite? Oh my god. Okay, so all these strings and everything here, I think this is dynamite. I didn't see the full picture. That's great. A varmint's diet consists of anything it can fit into its mouth and a surprising number of things it can't. That's really pretty funny. So yeah, pretty good. Feels like this can be looked at as an aggressive naturalize. Yeah, I think that it's going to be pretty staple, probably. The only problem is that like green artifact enchantment destruction is so damn good already that like this sort of maybe just like fits into certain decks that maybe want creatures instead of spells. On this sort of an effect, maybe like a deck that kind of like a Tortex deck that wants to loop stuff like this. But like we already have like Return from Nature or Return to Nature, you know, which is like one of the better, you know, effects we've ever had. We have Nature's Claim. We have Nature's Grasp, or what is it called? And there's like the 1 mana ones, and then there's this one that, you know, exiles a card from a graveyard, and then we've got this, right? And we have Caustic Caterpillar. So like green already had this covered. It already had this covered, and the fact that we're getting more of it is like cool, and it'll probably see some play. But again, I am disappointed that it doesn't have the flash, because that would have made it a staple. Or even Death Touch would have been good too. Okay, next one we have here. This has a lot of homes for it. I don't know exactly which ones, but this is like super generically playable in a lot of green decks. Dance of the Tumbleweeds, 2 mana sorcery with Spree. Spree allows you to choose 1 or more additional costs. And this allows us to do, there's a lot to look at here. So let's look at the first mode. Search your library for a basic land card or a desert card, put it into the battlefield. That means untapped. Okay, so this is already like on par with like Into the North type cards, you know, because Into the North puts it into play tapped. This one here puts it into play untapped. Okay, so it's kind of like a 2 mana spell. 2 mana spell if you're ramping with it. It finds desert cards though. Desert cards, there's 2 deserts that are good. I'm not going to be able to bring them up on the screen here because I didn't think about this, or I was thinking about this beforehand, but I didn't think to put it in the presentation. And that is, the 2 desert cards are Desert, which actually can kill certain classes of creatures really well, like gut tokens. You know, you can, there's some stuff you can do with it. And this is a number 2 for V2 Ghazi, Zach says. Yeah, definitely. But the desert that we care about are the new cycle of deserts that got printed in this set, which I actually also don't have in the presentation, which are tapped lands with a subtype of desert that ETB and do 1 damage to a player. And these cards are, well, first of all, they're actually just a free crime, which is pretty cool. But the other thing is that they are infinite mana outlets for Ghostly Flicker combo. So Dance of the Tumbleweed can find a dual land, put it into play. The fact that it can just find a dual in general is really good. It basically is, this is kind of like reading search up a basic land type, right? Like it's a little deceptive that way. So we can find a combo piece, an outlet, right, for a Ghostly Flicker combo that can be played in, you know, any of the colors that this is paired in. And it can just put a land into play. So it can just fix your mana. It can find a combo piece. It can do it fairly cheaply for like 2 mana if it comes into play untapped. And it also makes a creature. For 5 mana, we can put a very large elemental into play, right? And there are a lot of decks that really, really could use this. I strongly believe that the reason we don't see Tatiova winning a lot of games right now has nothing to do with a lack of win conditions or an inability to find those win conditions. It has everything to do with dying. And how do you not die? You gain life and you put creatures into play that can block. Dance of the Tumbleweeds, when you just like don't need any more, you know, lands, or just if you want to cast both, right? 1, 2, 3, 6 mana, make a huge creature, tutor up your combo piece in Tatiova, seems great. You know, this is easily going to be like a 7/7, 8/8 in a lot of the decks this is going to play in. I really like this. This is a very good sign. You know, we're getting all these cool ramp cards like Brave the Wilds, Return from the Hunt or something like that. The one that's like 3 mana, choose 2 of the 3, put a land into play, make a human, make a food, right? And then there's the other one that says put a land into play, investigate. We're getting basically like more dynamic and modal ramp spells that allow us to do something else while ramping. You know, like Cultivate is a great card in the early game, but late it feels really, really bad. I would rather that my early game I just ramped 1 and that then I had a card that I could draw later on, or maybe I make a body, or maybe I get a food token that I can plunder away, you know, that kind of stuff. And Dance of the Tumbleweeds is like, I would argue that it's like significantly better, right? Because decks that want to ramp are going to be able to cast both sides of this, and we're going to make a huge creature, right? This could also be in Mr. Orfeo, right? Like maybe Mr. Orfeo just wants, You know, a ramp on 3 that can make a big ass body. The only thing is it doesn't have trample. So, you know, there is that too. I think the same thing goes for the other one that has plot. But Dance of the Tumbleweeds is very good. Expect to see this in a lot of brews and in general, just like a lot of green decks that want to ramp. I think green ramp is starting to get to the point where it's better than, not better, but as good as just playing mana rocks. Because I think that's one of the things I've been looking at is like, when you have cards like Arcane Signet, why would you ever play Into the North? Like, what's the, like, artifact rocks, you know, come in, they can be tapped right away, they make any color, they can be plundered away. There's all sorts of things to pay off of them on. So oftentimes I just find like green ramp is not as good as rocks. And I think Dance of the Tumbleweeds helps tilt that in the other direction, where, you know, this has a lot of other abilities on it. The other ones are starting to like draw us cards and stuff. So anyways. And this one here, of course, Witherbloom Apprentice is a great home for it for the reasons we mentioned before. Now we are on to the commanders, and we're going to head into the end of the stream here. We're going to talk about a couple of these commanders on here. And of course, while we're at it here, I just want to take a moment. If you're enjoying the stream, if you're enjoying all this, you like what we're doing here, make sure to leave a like in the video here. It's a great way to support the channel for free, and it takes you just a moment. So it's a great thing to do for me and the channel and for cPDH as a whole. And of course, when the video is done, make sure to leave a comment as well. That's helpful for the algorithm and all of that good stuff. Let's do commanders. The first one. We're going to take care of the memes first. And I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but we've got a couple of memes here that I just wanted to mention because there may be some playability to them, and I want to acknowledge the off chance that maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a there that I don't know. Deep Muck Desperado works with persistent petitioners. Okay, so every time you commit a crime, each turn, everybody's gonna mill 3. So with persistent petitioners, you've got like the ability to tap your petitioners during other people's turns to mill everybody for 3. Okay. I think that like the best place for persistent petitioners is definitely in like Duskmantle Guildmage, because the deck interacts well. It has good defensive tools. It has like, you know, stacks ability to it. Like if your opponent tries to go Ghostly Flicker comboing, you just, you know, activate your ability, and every time a card goes into the graveyard, they're losing life for it. So they're getting the cards coming in and out, and they're dying, right? While also allowing you to burn people with your persistent petitioner for like big damage. Like play your petitioner, your 4th petitioner, activate the ability during your opponent's turn, tap 4 of them, burn for, you know, 13 or whatever it is, and then untap and do it again, you know, 26 somebody like super quick, while also having like an army of 1/3s that are all the same creature type, they're all the same name, they're humans. So like there's like a lot to do there. You can like Distant Melody, you can Keep Watch, you can do all this shit. And you've just got like a board of 1/3s that like don't die to sweepers. So I think that's the better home for the persistent petitioners. But the Deep Muck Desperado is 3 mana 2/4, so it's got a nice butt on it, which is good. And it does sort of amplify your mill. So yeah. There we go. That's what we got. Next one, Hollow Marauder. Hollow Marauder is interesting. It's a 4/2 flying, which is great. I love that stat line. It'd be nice if it had 1 more toughness. It was like a 4/3. That'd be even cooler. It's a rogue with an relevant ETB, meaning we can ninjutsu this thing. We can prowl, do some stuff like that. It's a 7 mana 4/2 flying that costs 1 less for each creature in your graveyard. Creature in the graveyard, like in your graveyard, is hard because it kind of makes us want to play some bad cards, like self-mill stuff. I really don't love it. Like black has so many good cards in it that aren't creatures that I don't want to mill into my graveyard, right? Self-mill is not card advantage. It's super fucking random. I don't like doing it. The other thing that this might make you want to do is like discard your own cards, like a card that says everybody discard a card. And then we're hitting into even worse territory. Mass discard when you are not a combo deck is pretty bad. Mass discard when you're not the combo deck is stripping answers for the combo deck at the table. You are doing their work for them. Unless they have like 1 or 2 cards in hand and they are the combo cards and you empty them of that, you discard all of their cards. But generally speaking, you can't. They draw a lot of cards because they're a combo deck. And the last cards that they discard, everybody else discards the rest of their cards. They have a lot of card advantage, so they don't discard all their cards. What's left? They're combo cards. So they go Ghostly Flicker, and everybody looks around. They look at you, and they're like, you motherfucker, look what you did to us. You discarded all of our interaction. Or worse, if they, like generally speaking, what I discard when somebody discards cards from me is lands first, interaction second, card advantage last. Because card advantage is what allows me to build back from having my hand discarded. And I can see the writing on the wall. If somebody's doing mass discard, they're going to try and discard my whole hand. So I want to be able to draw more cards to like stay in the game. So if I discard my interaction, somebody goes to combo off, that's it. That's all she wrote, folks. So don't be that person. Also, you are very likely to get hated out of the game for like good and bad reasons because you're doing mass discard. You may tilt people and make them use their interaction on you when you're maybe not as big of a problem. But let's read the rest of this card. When it enters the battlefield, discard any number of target cards or any number of target opponents. Each discard a card. For each of those opponents who didn't discard a card with mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. Damn, I mean, it's expensive, dude. You've got to have a lot of creatures in the graveyard. Like, plundering can help us with that. You probably need some amount of self-mill. Self-mill sucks. Most of the time, people are not going to discard a 4-cost card. And it says any number of target opponents. So you get to choose which opponents do this. Is that how I'm understanding this? Any number of target opponents. So you choose the target opponents. You're probably going to want to discard all of them, right? Maybe not. Maybe you don't. Regardless, it's 2 toughness, meaning it's going to die to all of our own sweepers. I don't love this card. If it was all creatures in all graveyards, then we'd be talking, right? Because then the edicts would be really, really good. If it was like all creatures in all graveyards, then we're having a conversation, because then we're very easily looking at like turn 3 Fleshbag Marauder, put 4 creatures into the graveyard. Now this card is 3 mana. Maybe some other effect, right? You kill something and suddenly you've got like a 4/2 flying that draws you cards. I could be wrong about it. I don't think it's very good, and I'll be super happy when I am wrong. There's a lot to look at here. Most of the time, people are not going to discard 4 mana value cards, so you are going to draw cards when they discard cards. So it is a lot of like asymmetry where we're drawing cards and they're discarding cards. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I hope one of you can prove that this is actually disgusting, and then post it in the Common Connoisseurs with a deck list and everything, and show me that I'm wrong on it. Because, yeah, it's like a 4/2 fly, like a 4-power flyer with a cost discount. Like, there's a lot to look at, right? Evasion, draws cards, discounts itself, right? I think dying easily is an upside, though. Grave Flicker to draw 3 is insane. Yeah. Zach, you seem like exactly the kind of person who could make a great version of this. So I hope you do. I hope you make a great version of this. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what you have in mind for it. It does have ingredients that I like. It has a lot of ingredients I don't like, though. Like, when are we casting this? It's 7 mana. Like, what do we have to do to ourselves to cast this for less? I don't know. It's a little weird. Like, a lot of mid-range black decks end up having like 20-ish creatures in them, and that doesn't, and that's because there's a lot of really good non-creature black spells. Pestilence, Drown in Sorrow, all the plunders, all the artifacts. You kind of want to have mana, so you play mana rocks, like, and then you play all these good kill spells, and by the end of it, you kind of look around and you're like, how do I fit more creatures in my deck, right? The black turtle, had the same problem with that. So next one we're going to talk about is Magebane Lizard. This is almost certainly trash. It is a 2 mana 1/4 lizard. whenever you or any other player cast a non-creature spell, it's going to deal damage to that player equal to the number of non-creature spells they've cast this turn. Lovely. This card is going to deal a lot of damage. So like we can't count it out. Maybe, you know, like if we're playing a deck full of ping, the fact that it's 2 mana and a 1/4 is like the biggest deal. Okay, so like that's the biggest deal. You play a deck full of pingers and you play some burn spells. You play like, you know, and you just have like a mono red burn stacks kind of a deck. This is kind of like a like red loyal subordinate. Yeah. It's like red loyal subordinate. It's cheaper for one thing. You can play this on turn 1 very, very easily. Lotus Petal, Rite of Flame. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, like, it's kind of a weird card. Like, you play this out, and maybe you don't even cast spells. Maybe you just, like, play this out on turn 1. Turn 2, you play a pinger. Turn 3, you, like, cast, like, Flame Rift or something. And you just, like, it's just, like, a race to the bottom. Like, race to kill everybody. I mean, as a deck, like, it's a 2 mana 1/4. Like, it doesn't die to bolts. It doesn't die to sweepers. If you kill it, it's kind of embarrassing because it comes back out on 4. It prevents combos, right? Like, you cannot combo with this in play, probably, because you're just going to take an enormous amount of damage, right? Non-creature spells is most of the spells, I would say. It's coming out even before Mana Rocks. If you're on the play and you play this on, like, turn 1 or turn 2, you are going to hit all of the arcane signets, all the Felwar stones, all the other signets, star compasses, mind stones. I don't know. You guys are going to have to tell me what you think of this, but it's some shit. I mean, like, trash or treasure, who knows? It hits us too. We don't really probably have a lot of great ways to gain life. I don't know. There's maybe like a creature focused deck where you had like all of the ETB creatures that do damage. You know, like your Pyroclastic Hellion, you know, Outrider of Maria, you know, 3 mana 3/2s that ETB and ping everybody for 2, and just like I don't know. Maybe some like creatures that you can saddle up. I have no idea. Like Flame Rift and Dragon's Approach. Maybe. I think everybody's going to take a lot of damage off of this. Right? And who's going to kill it? If I'm playing TPI, I might need to kill this. I cast a lot of non-creature spells. Mono red Zoo Burn. I think it, yeah. I mean, I guess part of the question is like, to what degree do we still cast spells that hurt us? We could play like Impact Tremors, right? And then play cards like Krenko's Command and Krenko's Command, and then like other ones that aren't creatures. Or maybe we still play them even though they're non-creature spells. I mean, everybody else is taking a lot more damage off of this than we are, probably. And then just play a bunch of pingers. And the pingers are going to ask us to play stuff that will ping us. But like the idea is that you are killing everybody very quickly with this. And they have to kill it to be able to cast spells in a way that doesn't kill them. And combo players can't. So like the weird thing is like, this does the TPI thing a little bit. Because TPI says, me being in, like with my TPI in play, I have a lot of answers to the combo. And the cost of that is that you all have to take damage off of my pingers. That's the exchange. Your life, your life points for some level of security against problems on the board that might turn up, right? And this is kind of the same thing. Everybody's going to look around and say, well, I guess the Flicker player can't go off. And in the meantime, I'm taking some damage. And that damage will add up over time. And maybe, you know, in the end, you end up just like casting a Rolling Thunder or a Fireball or, you know, stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure, but it's kind of interesting. Moving on from that, we've got Crom. Okay, so Crom Violent Cacophony. I think people are excited about this commander. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think we need to cool our expectations a little bit. People are excited that we got Crom because Crom is obviously very busted in cEDH. Tymna Crom decks are very meta. They're very great. They're great. They're mid-range farm decks in 4 colors. This is not the same thing. This is a 4 mana 2/3 flying. You have to cast 2 spells a turn to make it work. And when you do, and eventually when Crom dies, you have to rebuild Crom. You have to like build back the power and toughness. So like, let's compare this to another Izzet commander with a lot of similar characteristics. Crackling Drake. Crackling Drake has 4 toughness, always draws you a card. It's 4 mana. They both have flying. It's way bigger. Crackling Drake is way bigger by the time you do this. But there's a bigger problem with Crom, okay? And it's the same thing we all collectively learned when we built Wisp Drinker Vampire. And that is that we don't want a commander that tells us to hold the phone until the commander comes out. And that's what Crom says. Every time you play this card, you are going to experience what it feels like to have a handful of cards you want to cast and to not cast them. If you cast this on turn 3 because you had an Arcane Signet, first of all, you have to run it out without protection, okay? You're not interacting on that turn. You're not protecting it. And it's not the biggest problem at the table. Like this should not get killed right away. So you probably will get to do your thing, or maybe it gets edicted, right? Like imagine that nightmare. This gets edicted away, and you have all these spells in your hand, and you have all these spells that are there simply because Crom told you for them to be there, but they're pretty low quality. You know, cheap, instant speed, cantrip stuff that otherwise doesn't do anything. And who says you can cast 2 spells a turn? Who says you want to, right? Like your commander tells you to, but that doesn't mean you necessarily should. So you cast 1 spell, and then you're like sitting there with your removal spell, but there's nothing really that you want to kill. And then to draw the card, you have to use your premium kill spell to draw the card. I don't like this commander. I think that this commander is a huge trap. And I, not to discourage anybody from trying it, but like there are better commanders that do this sort of a thing. Like just try Mischievous Chimera. Mischievous Chimera is 2 mana with the same sort of requirement of like, I want to cast my spells with my commander in play. This one here is saying you've got to wait till minimum turn 4 to start using your spells in a way that will, profit off of Crom. And I just don't think that's good. He gets bigger. He has a lot of the things you want to see, right? Like he grows by playing your deck. He draws cards and he's got evasion, but he's 4 mana and there are better options. There are better options than Crom. I really think that this is like a huge trap. And you should consider playing Crackling Drake or something else instead. So I just listed it here because I wanted to address this topic. I think a lot of people have been excited about it, and I think that the card is just very, very mid and nowhere near Crom, the Crom that we all know and love. So anyways, there we go. Lazov is another interesting commander that was printed. Like the biggest things to say about Lazov is that it is a 3 mana Dimir commander with a 4 toughness bud. It is, and really like narrow that down, it is it's a Dimir 4 toughness creature. Okay, that has repeat graveyard hate on it. So this is like Dimir stacks, is the way I see this. But it only stacks as like certain kinds of decks. A lot of people are talking about like putting an Ulamog's Crusher into their graveyard, copying it, and then like attacking with your Ulamog's Crusher. That is, that's some real like Johnny Timmy shit right there, and it's not good. We don't have a lot of creatures like Ulamog's Crusher at common. We don't have a lot of stuff where we can like, in EDH, we could put a bunch of like really sick stuff in the graveyard. What would be an example? Like Phyrexian Dreadnought or something like that. Or like, I don't know, like maybe one of the Eldrazi or something. And you could copy it, and then you could like do some Annihilator stuff, or you could like, trample over for big commander damage. We just do not have that kind of power at common. This is going to be purely graveyard hate on a commander that grows in Dimir, which is actually pretty interesting. I mean, it's not maybe not like interesting, but it's like it's reasonable, right? 3 mana, 1/4. It has all creature types, which is actually means we're going to get of one mind. We're going to get other certain things, right? And we're putting counters on it, and it's ungated. Oh, the ability is gated, actually. The ability only triggers once each turn. That actually kind of sucks. That's weird. That triggers only once each turn should not be on this commander, because it's like a named character. It's a legend. Anyways, we're not going to complain about it too much, but it grows. It exiles cards from graveyards. The cool thing is, somebody tries to do their Abdel thing. This thing hoses Abdel, like just destroys it. Like you go and target their Archaeomancer. It doesn't even matter if you kill that thing or not. You're going to get your graveyard hate ability. So that's pretty cool. The bummer here is that it's only triggering once each turn. So you can't. So I guess if you have Relic of Progenitus, Relic is a good way to trigger this. Any way to repeatedly commit a crime is going to allow you to have instant speed graveyard hate. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know. Yeah, it seems fine. Like if somebody brought this to a tournament, I'm sure it would be totally reasonable, by purely the fact that it is a Dimir high toughness creature that grows on its own and exiles cards from graveyards. But other than that, like nothing wildly impressive. Papoosh mentions about Crom that maybe with plot, the Crom gets better. But yeah, plot isn't on any good cards. That's part of the problem. There are some good plot cards, but none of them really in Is It. There's a couple, but yeah. You can do stuff with Foretell. I don't know. Yeah. I think Crom is just like bad templating. It's incentivizing a bad thing to do. It's telling you to do something that you should not do. However, so when I first looked at this card, Cactus Folk Sure Shot, I thought, why not just Goreclaw? And there's a couple of reasons. It's another color. Reach, Ward 2 is a big deal. Okay, getting another color and getting Ward 2 is a big deal. The other color is going to give you better removal than Goreclaw, right? You're going to get bolts and you're going to get things like that. Maybe Outnumber or, just anything that's like 1 mana, deals a bunch of scred, things like that. At the beginning of combat on your turn, other creatures you control is a real bummer here. With power 4 or greater, gain trample and haste until end of turn. So what do you not get? Goreclaw gives you power, gives you trample. Goreclaw also gives power and trample to herself. So Goreclaw is a 5/4 trampler when she attacks. Goreclaw also discounts creatures. Goreclaw does not give haste. Haste is kind of a big deal. Haste is trample and haste is good. I don't know. It's like if Goreclaw was haste instead of +1/+1, we would probably take that. So I would say that +1/+1 and haste are kind of commensurate. They're similar. So there are actually reasons to play Cactus Sure Shot over Goreclaw. You also get better card advantage. You get the sorcery speed stuff that, Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse type cards that are going to allow you to draw more cards. So a little bit better card advantage, a little bit better interaction. You get a little bit more explosive with the haste, but haste also is going to read similar to Goreclaw's ability, because say you play Cactus Folk on turn 3, turn 4 you play a creature, you attack with Cactus Folk and the creature because it gets haste. You attack for 8. Goreclaw, the same sequence would look like turn 3 Goreclaw, turn 4 play 2 creatures and only Goreclaw attacks, but on the next turn we're going to attack for even more. But it actually, I think they even out a little bit, right? Like the haste means that we're converting damage sooner on the creatures we get. And the fact that it gives trample and haste probably takes certain creatures in red that we otherwise wouldn't play and makes them exciting. The thing is, we don't get any discount. We don't get any discount on stuff. So we're going to be mainly looking at 4-cost cards, that we could run out while holding a bolt up. Like a 4-cost 5/3 trample haste or something. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know if I'll be the one to do it, but this one you know, there may be some there, and a reason to play this over Goreclaw. Maybe. I think Goreclaw is very, very good. Goreclaw is a strong commander that floods the board with a whole bunch of shit that doesn't die very easily, and punches really hard. And Cactus Sure Shot kind of does the same thing a little bit. So, yeah, worth trying out. Definitely brew around it and see what comes up. You know, maybe we have a second, you know, alternative to Goreclaw, which would be cool. Always happy to see aggro decks entering the format. Next one. This is probably a banger. Baron Bertram Greywater. We are going to do a stream on this, not this next week, but the week after that. 4 mana, 3/4, legendary creature, Vampire Noble. Whenever one or more token enters battlefield, create a 1/1 black Vampire Rogue creature token with lifelink. It only triggers once each turn. That's a lot of text, okay? Whenever one or more token means treasures, bloods, creature tokens, food tokens, cactus tokens, junkyard tokens, I don't know, whatever they make next. Potions, I think potions are what's coming next. Roll tokens, those are, you know, rolls are tokens. All of them make 1/1 life-linking vampires. Okay? You can make them each turn. You can pay 2 to sack another creature or artifact to draw a card. There's so much about this that I like. Okay, so start from the power and toughness. 4 power, or 3 power, 4 toughness. 4 toughness is huge. Okay, it's the reason why, like, Denethor, I think, is a good commander. A repeat engine, right? All it says is make tokens, and we have a lot of good cards that just, like, accidentally make tokens, and a lot of cards that we can play because of this incentive. And then it draws cards off of sacrificing these cards. This is a self-contained engine. This is like Denethor, but like more power, a little bit more expensive, can create more tokens, and draws cards instead of draining. And they have lifelink. Why do they have lifelink? I mean, it's like, it's just, you know, sometimes you like WotC, it doesn't exactly make sense. Like certain cards being like super, super trash and like underdeveloped, and then cards like this where you're like, they have lifelink? Why? That's awesome. And we get to draw cards off of artifacts and creatures. That's huge. We get to plunder. This is like an on-board plunder machine. It's very sick, very grindy. You know, you're going to win games on like turn 12 or something like that, maybe later. But definitely resilient, very appealing. We got El Ahim. Welcome, my friend. Glad to catch a live stream. Been listening to the VODs of these Let's Builds streams at work all week. Well, dude, I'm glad that you're enjoying all the videos. It's fun to. It's always fun to hear when somebody's been binging some of these videos. So I hope you're learning a lot, and you can always, you know, catch this one later on once we're done, and you can watch the rest of the stuff that we covered. Although I'm sure you have many other well-formed opinions on the other cards that we've had this set. This whole set has been WTF Wizards for me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like we've covered some cards that feel genuinely very pushed. And then we've covered some cards that there's a whole bunch of other cards that we didn't cover that were just like really, really bad. But we have to remember that the reason that Wizards prints cards the way that they do is for draft. So like when we're looking at cards for common, we're like, why did they do it this way? Like we already had a card like this and that was good enough for common. And now we have this other one and it's down powered, but it's also a common, but it's all about draft. The cards are designed for draft first. They're meant to work with draft, right? It's all integrated. What is that called? Like top-down set design, where it's like, we have these mechanics. We're going to design the card around these mechanics. I might have the language wrong there about top-down, bottom-up stuff, but basically the idea is we're making like a self-contained set that works with itself, and the cards inside of it play well with themselves, but they may not have any historical context for existing. You know what I mean? Like they may not have any historical context for being better or worse than an equivalent card. So Josh Bailey says those dies draw creature cards are going to love this dude. Yeah, absolutely. Baron may be one of those places where we actually play the medic and we play the occultist and we play all that. Like, you know, the card advantage in this deck is going to be ludicrous. We could easily put like 25 really, really cheap and good and efficient draw spells in this deck and just never run out of cards. It is a 4-mana commander, so we do want to get this online soon. But like the thing I've noticed is that comparing this to Crom, right? I'm still happy to cast Deadly Dispute even if my commander isn't in play, because Deadly Dispute is a good card. If my Deadly Dispute doesn't make a 1/1 black vampire token, that's fine. It's still a good card, right? So I'm not super concerned about the fact that this is like a 4-mana commander that you want to get out super quickly. The other thing is that it's a 4-mana commander, so we're going to want to ramp into it as soon as we can. And black decks with Plunder in them that want to ramp tend to be really good, and it's even better here because this guy just says if you flood with like your ramp rocks, you just sacrifice them. You tap them for mana, you tap it for mana, tap a land, sack your rock, draw a card. You can turn those rocks into more cards later on. If you've just been hitting your land drops all game and you hit a few too many of your mana rocks, you can imagine like an end step where you just like pay 6 mana, and technically it's not even 6 mana because you just tap the rocks that you sacrifice, tap 3, draw 3 cards. And you just start wholesale sacrificing all of your stuff to draw a ton of cards for that late game push, right? It's amazing. 4 toughness means you're going to survive Pestilence, Drown in Sorrow, Sulphurous Blast, Dragon Breath Weapon, Fiery Cannonade, all that. Elohim says, my poor new Vial Smasher hitting only one opponent instead of all opponents is really sad. And it hurts. Yes, it does. Vial Smasher is kind of like on the same level of Crom. They basically took like a bunch of really powerful commanders and they made them really bad. And they made them uncommons, which is sad. But it is what it is. Expect a stream on this, not this next week. Next week, we're actually going to be doing something really, really unique. So make sure to keep an eye out for a thumbnail coming out. Make sure to hit the notify me on it so you don't forget it. But we're going to be doing some live coaching with somebody on a really, really cool Orzhov commander that I have had built for a long time. So after that, we'll probably do Baron and do it that way. Elohim says, oh my god, I missed the sack a creature or artifact. Yeah, it's omnivorous, right? I describe it as being omnivorous, and that's a huge deal. It means that like Ichor Wellspring, Mephitic Draught, Nihil Spellbomb, Arkham's Astrolabe, all this shit that you just like are happy to sacrifice. This guy makes it happen. This dude would have been playable without the whole top line of text. Yeah, exactly. Like there's like a lot of little things you could cut out of here that would still be good. Like if this said, whenever that you don't get a life linking one and it was only creatures, it would still be reasonable. But like with all this stuff included, I think this is actually like fairly pushed in a sort of like mid-range fair grindy way. Mr. Willis says, I will be trying to build this Baron to play on my store events here in Brazil. I'm honestly not believing how good this set is. Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. It's definitely a very exciting set. And yeah, good job in leading the charge there in Brazil for PDH. Brazil has always been an inspiration to me for how to build community around like budget Magic formats. And I've always tried to mimic what you all accomplish there on the regular. Your Pauper scenes there. Pauper scene is amazing there. The PDH scene seems to be lagging behind a little bit from what I've read, but it just means that there's an opportunity that needs to be taken advantage of. So maybe you can be that person. Elohim says, can't wait for the stream on this guy. Been looking for a legendary Orzhov commander that I can bring to lower power budget regular EDH games. Yeah, you could do this one. I think this one is potentially even better than the other one, but Denethor is another option. But I think you probably pick Baron just because Baron, like, there's no downside. Like, it's going to be really hard to, like, not have action in hand with this guy. So, yeah. Last one, we're going to talk about Honest Rutstein. Honest Rutstein is great. Golgari Commander, we did a live stream on it. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure to go watch it. It was a lot of fun. Do note that in all the Let's Build videos, you can always watch the first half an hour of the video, 15 minutes to half an hour, and I'll have a presentation where I'll give you like the gist of it, like the structural elements you'll need to think about when you're building the commander yourself. And then the rest of it is the live stream where you can kind of watch everybody interacting and participate in the building of the deck and the tuning and all that stuff. You can kind of see my brain working when you do that. But Honest Rutstein is amazing. It's all about this cost discount for me personally. This is very unique. It allows us to do Golgari combos. You can do Ashnod's Altar, Workshop Assistant, Mirror Retriever loops with this using like a Falkenrath Noble as an outlet. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with this. The cost discount is really good in fair mid-range zoo decks too. It's discounting Initiative, it's discounting your Cascade creatures, it's discounting all of the Phyrexian Rager, Dusk Legion Zealot creatures. It's very, very, very cool. And if you play this on turn 2, turn 3 can be extraordinarily explosive. You know, doing like Viridian Emissary into a 2-mana Fleshbag Marauder into a 1-mana Novice Occultist, holding up like Ghastly Demise and a Village Rites, right? Like big game actions, big vibes. So very, very cool. And then when he dies eventually, you just get to get a creature back. Most of the time, you won't get this effect on the first cast. Sometimes if you cast it on 3, you'll get your Troll of Khazad-dûm or your Generous Scent back with it. But generally speaking, this is for the recast, and that's good. Papoosh here says Baron is kind of like Bartholomew del Presidio. Yeah, except it is, except that Bartholomew asks you to punch right away and hard. And it also asks you to, it's like you want to give it flying, basically. You want to give it flying and like one-shot somebody or two-shot them. It's a Voltron deck, right? Bartholomew looks like a Voltron deck to me, whereas the Baron here, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, this one here wants to grind everybody to dust, and it will do a great job of it. This is going to be super strong. So anyways, yeah, Honest Rutstein's good. Make sure to go watch the video on that if you haven't seen it already. You don't need to watch all of it. There's a lot of really good stuff just in the first like hour. So yeah. And then the last one we're going to talk about, the actual last one, is Ruthless Lawbringer. You know, keep an eye out for Brad. Brad is working on this currently right now. Orzhov, Commander, destroys non-land permanents. It's in white, so you can flicker it with either black-gray flicker spells or with just an Ephemerate or, you know, like a Scroll Shift or Cloud Shift type cards. Sack a creature, destroy a non-land permanent. That's a pretty strong ability. That's a pretty strong ability to put on an ETB that we can reuse very readily at common. It is unfortunate that it is a 3/2. It means that it's going to die to all of our own sweepers. The flickers and the undying effects. The undying effects can give it one more toughness, but the flickers will take the counters away. So it's not going to be great at like playing the good black sweepers that we kind of want to play when we're in black, because black and white is really good at doing initiative and monarch, and that's how we generate card advantage, and it's plundering, and you know, so there's some things that work against it here. It doesn't even have flying, which is a bummer. If this had flying, I'd be a lot more excited about it, because then you could punch people for 3, you know, while you're doing this. But this card works really great with like the new Nuzumi Linebreaker, the you know, your sort of Hunted Witness, Garrison Cat, Doomed Traveler type stuff. The 1-mana creatures that when they die, they produce another body. Each one of those enables 2 Vindicates, basically, which is really sweet. So definitely make sure to check this one out. This is going to be a fun one to brew around. I don't doubt that we'll see this in the competitive scene, just because it's basically like a 3-mana version of Skyfisher Spider with a little less text on it. And Skyfisher Spider has been a very good deck for me. So, okay, with that, we're all wrapped up, folks. Thank you all for participating today, for joining me in this exploration of Outlaws of Thunder Junction. It was great hanging out with y'all. Going to answer a couple comments here before we sign off. Like if Bartholomew de Presidente of Value Town. Yes, that's right. You could do a Value Town version of it, although at that point I think you'd probably be looking at Ellis instead. And then you said, man, have that type of versatile removal in the command zone seems really interesting, but also not sure if there's something that white-black is really missing when you can run so much of that in the 99. Yeah, that's true. I think what the Ruthless Lawbringer does is you don't play less removal. You play the same amount of removal, probably, maybe a little bit less. And then you just skip all of the flexible stuff that tends to be sorcery, speed, and bad. And you just play this, right? So you still have like great removal, and you have like a catch-all answer. This is going to be great against Gretchen. This is going to brutalize Gretchen decks. I think it's going to be very, very hard for them to deal with, especially because like Grave Flicker plus, you know, Village Rites is the kind of thing that they don't know that you're going to do. So you can bait them, right? You can bait a Gretchen player into countering spells by going Supernatural Stamina on the Lawbringer. And if they don't want the Lawbringer to come back, they have to counter the Supernatural Stamina before you Village Rites it. But you don't have to have a Village Rites in hand to do that. So you can kind of bait some stuff. It's kind of interesting that way too. Josh asks, does the Rutstein work with escape and escape abilities? Anytime you cast. So let's take a look here. So rarity, so O, escape. Escape. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its escape cost. Yes, it does work. So it works with like Tizarus Charger. It works with Underworld Charger. It works with Loathsome Chimera, Voracious Typhon. There's a couple of different cards that it works with that you can do that with. It doesn't work with Unearth because Unearth is an exile. You just exile the card and then like and create a copy of it, token copy. Yeah, it's very cool. This is a very, very, very cool commander. I expect this to show up in competitive. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with this. It's very high velocity, very like high impact, you know, running out like multiple edicts early on to just like destroy everybody's like board presence while you're building it up and drawing cards. This deck leverages edicts like crazy. So, okay, with that, we are going to wrap things up here. Just need to go and join my partner and go make some food, eat some dinner. But it's been really great having you all here. We had some great ideas, Erosium and Elohim, Papoosh, Mr. Willis, Zach, Fly, you know, all you were really contributing a lot of great stuff. Mr. Flores was here. We had Charles Vane earlier on. Y'all had some really great ideas about where we can fit these different cards into it. I think overall this set is actually providing like kind of our average number of commanders, like, you know, average number of maybe like, you know, 3 to 5 new commanders. I think we have 3 to 5. We have Honest Rutstein, Lawbringer, Baron, maybe Cactus Sure Shot, maybe Lazov, right? Probably a bunch of Crom players who will weep themselves into a stupor when they find out how bad it is. But I think, yeah, 3 to 5 is about right. We have some extraordinarily pushed cards. So like we can kind of look at this and be like, well, what do we have to get excited about? We got a lot of really pushed commons, or a few pushed commons, and then a few just generically solid cards for specific decks. So is it a crazy set? No. Is it good? Yes. Is it continuing the pattern of WotC pushing the power level of commons and expanding its territory? Absolutely. And that's worth every bit of our attention. So Mr. Willis says, thanks. It was nice to see all the awesome new legends with you. Yeah, super stoked. Thank you, Mr. Willis, for joining us today. And Elohim, you have a good one too. So with that, Connoisseurs of Fine Common Cardboard, if you do one thing for me on the way out, make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. When the videos come up, hit that notification bell on the video to notify me so you don't miss any videos. And of course, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can go to the patreon.com/Common Connoisseurs, where you can start supporting the channel financially for as little as $2 a month, which gets you access to the supporters only section of the Discord, where all updates to all the decks that I maintain, I have hundreds of them, are posted there on a regular basis, along with rationale, tournament reports, all sorts of stuff, gameplay advice. I even have like a human advancement section in there where I post stuff about how I'm thinking about becoming a better person, all that stuff. So it's a great place to be. It's a good community, and it's something that I really appreciate when people join up and support. But of course, the free thing to do, make sure that leave that like once the stream ends. Also, if you could leave a comment for the algorithm, that's really helpful. It just gets the video into the hands of more people, which spreads the word about cPDH, this amazing format. Josh Bailey, thank you so much. You have a good night as well. And with that, Connoisseurs of Fine Common Cardboard, thank you so much for being here. And wherever you are in the multiverse, we'll catch you on the battlefield. Peace out, friends.